Hey guys, I'm Mia and today we're making truffle honey pizza. My version of the dish might make a couple Italians turn in their grave because it's by no means traditional, but it's something me and my family have come to love. With this sweet and savory blend, the aroma of the truffle oil and the added flavor of the pistachios, there's absolutely nothing like it. So without further ado, let's go! Alright, let's get started. The base of what makes pizza so amazing is the dough. For this, you'll need salt, flour, yeast, olive oil, and water. These are the base ingredients of any pizza, but your food doesn't have to follow any rules, so feel free to tweak the ingredients as you go. Dough is pretty straightforward to make. You mix everything, knead, let it rise, knead again, let it rise, and then top it off with whatever toppings you like. With a little magic, let's move these out of the way. Poof, gone. Okay, let's get started. We start off with actually measuring the ingredients of our dough. Don't be like me. Make sure your scale is close before you put your bowl on top so you don't end up weighing your bowl. Anyway, I used about 7 cups of flour. Now traditionally you'd have semolina flour as part of the dough, but I don't have that, so I'm just using all-purpose. Make sure that you always have extra ingredients in case things go sideways, or you add a little too much of the liquid. Now, the thing with yeast is that active, dry, and instant have two different measurements. You use about 25% less instant yeast than you do with active dry. So I used about 1.5 teaspoons, but if you're using active, you probably have to use about 2 teaspoons. Anyways, don't forget to mix, and then we add our salt. I typically use about 1.5 teaspoons, but as y'all can see, sis struggled a little bit. It's okay. You got it, girl. Go. You got it. Okay. You got it. Go. Okay. And she gave up. It's okay. We've all been there, and that's what garlic salt is for. I used about 1.25 teaspoons of garlic salt in case y'all were wondering. But again, measure with your heart. And then give it a mix. Now we can add our wet ingredients. I use about 6 tablespoons of olive oil and 2.5 cups of water. But the thing with dough is that hydration will vary depending on your climate's humidity, so this is a rough give or take. In any case, you can always just add a little flour and a little water or oil, depending on which one you need. Also, before we can proceed, I'm grabbing my silicone mat, which will be used when kneading the dough. You can also do this over your kitchen counter, but mine is polished wood, so if I ruin it, my mom's gonna throw me away. Anyway, back to kneading. I'm first combining everything in the bowl with my silicone spatula. I'm just trying to roughly form it into a workable dough before I plop it onto my surface to knead. I don't recommend mixing the dough with just the oil and the dry ingredients because this actually inhibits gluten formation, which makes our dough chewy. So, it's best to leave the mixing towards the end so you don't work against it. Again, this step slightly changes if you're using active dry yeast because that requires blooming, which you usually do with the water we're using, but in that case, you'd prepare the bloom before any of the steps as it requires a bit more time, but in my case, I don't need to do that. Now, we just continue to bring the dough together as best we can until it starts to form a cohesive mass, and then we can plop it down to our kneading surface and begin to knead the dough. You only really need to do this for about 10 to 15 minutes depending on how consistent you are with your motion. What we're trying to do is develop a good crust which is ideally slightly chewy. For this to happen, gluten needs to develop, which we achieve by kneading. What you want to be doing is pushing down with the palm of your hand and stretching it just enough so that you work the dough without tearing it. I like to kind of rest my body weight on my forearms during this so I don't get as tired. If this is your first time, you might want someone else to tag in and help out because it can get pretty tiring. Now, what you'll see is that as I knead the dough, I add a little bit of flour just to prevent it from sticking. You want to ideally work with the dough without adding too much new flour in, but if you need it, just add it and keep kneading. You'll know you're done when the time is up and your dough is smooth, and when you poke it, it springs back up nicely. Then you can proceed to put it back into the bowl you used if you're too lazy to get a new one. Or you could just get a new one. You can add a little bit of oil too so it doesn't stick, but I'm going to be using saran wrap over my bowl, so I won't really be losing any moisture from my dough. But if you're rising it with a towel, please oil the bowl and the surface of the dough, just so that it doesn't dry up. And that's it. Now you leave it to rest for about 18 to 30 hours, depending on when you want to eat it. You know it's done when the kitchen starts to smell like beer, because the yeast has done its thing. And we're back. It's me again about 27 hours after we've made the dough. Now it's time for us to do the rest of our pizza making. Let's take our dough out of the container, and what you'll see is that I put another bowl open side down on the opening to form a domed lid for the dough container. Because on my first ever attempt of making pizza, I put the dough to rest beside my refrigerator so that it was nice and warm. But what happened was that it overproofed overnight and it spilled out of my saran wrap seal. And that kind of traumatized me because it was my first time working with yeast, you know? Anyway, as you can see, the gluten on our dough has relaxed, and we can see this from the webs that is left on our bowl. This is a good sign, but now we need to pound it out again and knead it just for a little bit. Keep kneading your dough up until a smooth ball forms. And when you poke it, it should spring back up. After it's nice and smooth again, we can now divide the dough into 4 pieces, or to how many you'd prefer. You can have a few large pizzas, or even super tiny ones, depending on how small you decide to make them. You then have to turn them into smooth little pieces before you cover them up so they don't dry out. Again, I'm too lazy to get a new piece of saran wrap, so I'm just gonna use what I used last night. Now you kind of just let them chill on their own for another hour while we get started on our sauce. For our sauce, I usually like to start off my sauces with a thing of butter. Just let it sizzle before you add your onions. You can add however much you like. I just kind of put about half a cup. And then I like to season my onions while that's cooking, and then I add my spices so that it infuses with the butter. The one I used there was basil and thyme, and I just kind of let it simmer for a little bit before I decide to add a little bit of cracked black pepper, and then my garlic. The reason why I cook the onion first is so that it gets soft before I add my garlic, because garlic cooks a lot faster, you know? And then here I add my spice blend. This is onion powder, garlic powder, and Viking salt. And just kind of add it in. But again, you can use whichever spices you like. And here I am just cranking up my oven to the highest setting for our pizza. Doesn't matter what it is, just put it on the hottest setting. Okay, back to the sauce. Here I'm just adding my whiskey to deglaze the pan. This kind of just allows me to add more aromas while kind of making sure that nothing is sticking, you know? Okay, then we add our 2 things of heavy cream and then a splash of milk. This will kind of just thin out the sauce, and of course we add our cheese last. So you just let that cool. After you're done with it, just leave it alone, don't touch it, close it, and we move on to chopping our pistachios. Pistachios, I should have probably bought the ones that are already open, but here is me trying to pop some of them open, and some of them were real hard. Okay, I had sore fingers for a while. But anyway, we chop them into bite-sized pieces to top our pizza off with. This just adds another layer of texture and good flavor to it. I really like pistachios on this. You can choose to skip it. Again, everything is optional when it comes to toppings. You do what you like. If you don't like pistachios, don't add them. And you prepare your pan. I use a little bit of aluminum foil just so that it doesn't stick, because I don't have the pizza stone, but you can choose not to. I just find it a lot easier to work with. After an hour of proofing, I just like to knead my dough a little bit, just a little bit more, you know, just to get things going. And then I start to flatten it out on the container. So just try to get it as thin or as thick as you like, and then spoon on your sauce. As you can see, mine is still smoking hot, which I should have probably let it cool a little bit more, but it was fine. It was whatever. And then I sprinkle on my cheese and a little bit of pistachios. Now for our glaze, now we're going to be using our honey and truffle oil. I don't recommend the cereal truffle oil, just use a different one. It definitely does not smell good and the fragrance is not there, so I don't recommend that. And just mix it, and after you kind of just mix it well and use it to top off your pizza, and you're done. And so that's how we make truffle honey pizza, fresh from the Cuisina. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, share the video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and turn the bell notifications on for more amazing videos, and leave a comment on what you'd like to see on our future videos. Thanks for watching.